Good evening, everyone. Today we are welcoming all audience and panelists for our webinar on returning to work in an era of heightened sensitivity. Hi everyone. We are just starting in a minute. We are just waiting to audience to settle down. Thank you, our eminent panelists and Maggie, the founder of Workplace Trends India. We have today with us eminent workplace strategist and architect K. Sargent, Senior Principal Director of Workplace at HOK. Krishnaswamy Nagarajan, he is Director Global Real Estate India and South Asia at IBM. Mr. Amit Grover, he is Executive Director DLF Office Businesses. Mr. Sachin Boradia, Senior Director Cushman and Wakefield. And Mr. Bimal Desai, Founder and Principal DSP Design Associates. We have developer, architect, occupiers, and project management all in one frame. And we have complete ecosystem today to discuss about returning to the work in era of heightened sensitivity. I would like to invite Maggie to welcome our all panelists and audience and give the brief introduction of Workplace Trends India and Global.
Thank you, Tushar. Thank you very much, Tushar, for inviting me to introduce today's webinar. Tushar is our founding partner in India, excuse me, and ran a fantastic inaugural conference for us last November. So we were hoping to have another conference in New Delhi this year, but I'm not sure. I don't know what the plans are with that at the moment, but hopefully it won't be too long until we see you all again. Just a little bit of background on Workplace Trends. We've grown out of base in the United Kingdom. I'm based near London, and but now we've been running for about 18 years, I think, and we're reaching worldwide now with conferences and events and a global community that stretches out to the US and India, Australia, South Africa, and further afield. So our remit really is that we like to connect workplace professionals. So we're very much community based, and around this community we run conferences, and we have a website and LinkedIn activity and a large LinkedIn group, which I really wanted to encourage you to have a look at and join up with. Also, I mean, have a look and join, please do join or follow Workplace Trends India on LinkedIn. Just search for Workplace Trends India and give them a follow. And join our group, please. We're about 11,000 workplace professionals in our group. So again, just search groups for Workplace Trends and just pop a request in, and I'll probably approve you. So I'm sure if you've been on this webinar, you're well qualified. What else did I want to say? I wanted to say welcome to Kay. Thank you so much, Kay, for hosting or moderating today. I would have seen Kay in March at our Workplace Spring Summit if all had been well. But that's going to be rearranged for the future, hopefully. So hopefully I'll see Kay again soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and thank you to all the rest of our speakers today. I'm going to hand back to Tushar to introduce all our eminent speakers. Thank you, Tushar, and thank you to the speakers.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you for coming on this panel. I would like to request to all audience to just look at the bottom bar. There is a Q&A session. They can post their question and answer questions in that Q&A box. Please don't use the chat box because all the panelists are looking at the Q&A box and they will be taking your questions. Also would request to go for a gallery view so you can see all panelists in one frame. And Maggie just would like to just give you India perspective also. The Workplace Trends India has 15,000 people now in their community, and every day we are getting 500, 600 people every day added to this community. And thank you to everyone who's supporting this initiative and getting this community day by day richer and richer. So Kay, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me here. I'm excited to be here. I'm going to share in just a second and just want to confirm, can you all see my screen?
Yes, now I'm
perfect. Wonderful. Well, we're really excited to be here. I'm excited to be here. The panelists and I have had some really good conversations to prepare for this. And what we want to really talk about today is returning to the workplace in a world of heightened sensitivity. So our world and the workplace and our work is going to change going forward. And so how is that going to be impacted? What we want to really try to do today is bring you a little bit of a global perspective about what is happening, because this little virus has had a big impact on all of us. And now everyone all around the world has a heightened sensitivity to their surroundings. And that will impact the way that we interact in the workplace. And so the question that everybody is asking is, how do we prepare for the re-entry of people into the workplace? So I want to share first just some high-level thoughts, because I'm probably going to bet that this is not the first webinar that you all have been on. You've probably been on more webinars in the last 10 weeks than you ever thought that you would in a year. So we want to get right to some of the points, and we want to maybe add and not just repeat all the stuff you've already heard, but maybe get a little deeper and give you a global perspective. So we all know that there's a few things that we're dealing with right now, right? So first, everybody is having to deal with distributed work from home, and what role that will play going forward. We also know that everybody is focused on physical distancing and making sure that we have adequate space in the workplace so that people feel that they are safe. We're all focused on sanitation and cleanliness, and how do we improve that so people feel safe? There's lots of talks about, should we be putting up plastic screens, or how do we put up boundaries or shielding to protect people? There's lots of conversations also about autonomous, hands-free, voice-activated workplace, and how do we monitor that going forward? Can we use the Internet of Things? Can we use apps to reduce the number of touch points, or to make it easier for people when they come in? And of course, enhanced HVAC systems. So we're going to talk a little bit more about some of these, but we know that these are some of the big topics. We also know that well-being, a focus now less on how many square feet per person, but do we have enough space and distance so that people can feel safe in the workplace? It's also about, if we're bringing people back to the workplace, it's really about social solidarity and making sure that people feel connected to one another. And then about meeting spaces. If we can't have people sitting as closely, then what does that mean for the future of meeting rooms, and how do we need to readjust them to create those types of gathering spaces? And how do we upskill the talent that we have? And let's just be honest, how do you even get to the workplace? In some highly dense areas, getting to the workplace can be running through the gauntlet, right? And so in many cases, redesigning the workplace might actually be the easiest thing that we are dealing with right now. Getting there and making people feel comfortable are probably the bigger hurdles that we're all starting to realize we need to really address as we do this. So, how are different regions of the world handling this? Because, excuse me, we're all in a little bit of a different time frame, right? China is probably 6 to 8 weeks ahead of us. Others are just starting to hit their peak. In Latin America, where it's just starting to go into winter, the numbers there are starting to rise, and they're still on the rise. And the US, well, the US is kind of all over the place right now, right? So we did a poll from people all around the world, and here is some of the responses. We're going to share some of the responses with you all, and we're also going to poll you throughout this session, and we're going to hear from our experts about what's happening in India. So the first polling question that we did from our survey is there a stay-at-home order in place in your country? And 76% of the world at one point or another had a stay-at-home order or a lockdown. When you think about that, that is truly unprecedented. And the ramifications that has had, and some silver linings too, have been really, truly interesting. The next, has your country set a date for re-entry to the physical workplace? Well, 45% of the world has, and it's right around now, right? The end of May for many countries. China and lots of parts of Europe, Asia have already gone back. Other parts of the world are just starting to, but 55%, it's still to be determined when they will open up again. So this is far from over as we continue down this path. So what are the challenges that people have had to face? 32% say that why they've been working from home, their family or roommates or their situation has been one of the biggest challenges. 28% say they don't have enough space. 16% say they don't have the right tools, or there's IT issues, or communication issues, or lack of infrastructure. So it's absolutely fascinating when we talk about will people continue to work from home, and is this going to become permanent? There are lots of companies, Krishna, including IBM, that have done massive experiments with work from home. And so it's not just as easy as saying, hey, it worked, we all survived, let's all work from home. There's lots of other challenges that we have, and we need to be able to think about those and address those. So we're going to go to our first polling question and see how do you foresee remote work continuing post-pandemic? We're going to give you some options here. Do you foresee that remote work continuing? And so the options are up on your screen. Put them all up here, and if you guys can vote and then hit submit, that would be great. So the first one is yes, but I was already working remotely before COVID-19. The second option is yes, but this is new for me, but I plan to do so full-time going forward. Yes, this is new for me, but I'm only going to do it a few times a week. I'm only going to do it 1 day a week, or no, I can't wait to get back to the office, or no, my job is requiring me to be back in the office full-time. So we'll give everybody a minute to vote on that one. And I'm going to vote. Have all the panelists voted too? Hopefully. All right, do we get to see the polling results? Tushar, will those pop up for us? Ah, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so the highest percentage is 38%. Yes, this is new for me, but I plan to continue doing so a few times a week. So if we add that with the ones above it, because those are also all yeses, it looks like a majority of people will incorporate remote working into their future to some degree or another, right? So let's see, if I take 69% of people basically said yes, 69. So this is something I think that is going to be sticking with us for a long time, and we really need to think about how can we address this. Now that presents some interesting challenges in countries like India, where maybe working from home hasn't necessarily always been encouraged in the past. So, Kushna, I want to start with you, because we know that IBM has had a long history of maybe working from home in certain parts of the world, and those programs being successful. But how has the work from home experience been for people in India? And once that order is lifted, do you foresee that people are going to continue working remotely going forward from your perspective?
Okay, thanks for the introduction. Interesting data that you shared with us. One thing is that the work from home has been surprisingly successful in a country like India, where we've been hearing over a period of time the various factors which don't support it. So this particular lockdown did show that the capacity is there, the infrastructure is there, because almost 100% of the people did, very near to the 100%, because the lockdown was almost complete for the first 2 weeks, and business was continuing to get conducted, at least from the corporate industry. Maybe not the manufacturing, maybe not retail, but from a corporate office setup, it's been a big eye opener in terms of what's possible. While it's been successful for the first couple of months, it's okay when you have a particular imposition on people on this is what needs to be done for a particular period of time. Once you make it voluntary, it's slightly going to be a little different, but this did give people an experience and a flavor of what work from home means, and the different experience, and even your survey showed some kind of update on how people felt about working from home. Yeah, I work from home, I might still continue to work from home for a day or two. That's been the current sort of trend for people in India. And to go to the second part of the question, once it's lifted, this is going to be an, guesstimation, not even an estimation. So right now people are having the sense of, I've been home for too long, because there is something that's been forced upon you. Okay.
Yeah.
So once you force something upon somebody, the immediate reaction is, hey, I need to do something else, that I want to do something which I want to do, right? But at this point of time, the office atmosphere is a very, very different office atmosphere from what they have experienced before the COVID. We need to keep that in mind very, very clearly. There are two worlds. One is the world before COVID as we know it does not exist anymore. This is the new normal, or like some of my friends used to call it, the new abnormal, right? So, you go to your office, you can wear your mask, you stay 8 feet away from 6 to 8 feet away from your colleague. You don't generally want to use the meeting room because the proximity is too close. So some of the concepts of being in office, the camaraderie, the social interactions, that sort of is very, very diluted. And then the thought process, it's a psychological thing. People still have in their mind on, is this place infected? Can I touch this door handle? Can I push the lift button? There is too much of thought processes happening around what if. So I think it's a wait and watch scenario now. As it gets lifted, people will surely want to go. But from an organization point of view, the organization will want to say that, hey guys, wait and watch. Let's see what happens, because there's a lot of government mandates that are coming in state-wise. Each state has a different set of rules and regulations on how to come back. So I think we will have to mix both. Companies are going to be cautious. They're going to say, hey, we just don't want to rush back to work and get caught into a wave 2 or a wave 3 of infection, or a government change in mandate saying that, hey, there is one more lockdown coming in. And also what we are doing is we are slightly looking towards Singapore and Asia Pac, because they are 6 to 8 weeks ahead of us, like you said, trying to see what's actually happened. We do have a small little trend of people coming back, a second wave hitting, a second circuit breaker, as they call it in Singapore, being implemented. So I think India is way too large for us to just do back and forth. So
it's interesting when we look at Asia. What's happened in Asia is people in Asia are actually very eager to get back to the workplace, because they typically live in smaller units, smaller houses with multiple generations, and so it can be very difficult. So that polling where it said 32% of my roommates or my family are the biggest challenge, you often have as many, if not more, distractions at home than you do at the workplace. The other thing is that in certain parts of the world, you don't have the infrastructure, whether it's spotty internet or internet speeds. And also, I think, in companies like IBM have found out that it's sometimes really hard, even though you can see people, sometimes it's still hard to really collaborate and or to mentor younger people. So a fascinating statistic that everybody should keep in mind, that on similar polls that have been cut by generation, the generation that has the least desire to work remotely, surprisingly, is the youngest generations that are coming in. They're the most eager to get back to the workplace. And it could be because they might still be living in apartments, but I think a lot of that is they're seeking mentorship from senior people, and they want that guidance. So I'm going to keep going so we can get to some of our other panelists and some questions. Unless, did anybody else want to weigh in on that? Krishna, did you want to weigh in on anything else, or anybody else on the panel?
I'm good. This is at a high level what I wanted to say.
Okay, good.
Kay, when panelists are speaking, can you stop share of your screen? And then you can share your screen when, you want to share something.
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kay.
Okay, so are the clients in your region beginning to determine what reentry will look like? So from our global poll, what we found is that 55% said they're still assessing what needs to happen. That 30% say yes, and they have an action plan, and that the remainder are still trying to determine that. When we get to how do you feel your clients are prepared for the reentry, 42% said that they feel other companies and or their clients are ready, and 58% said they did not believe that they were truly ready for reentry. When we asked the question, how is your company prepared for reentry? People were much more confident in their own preparedness to go back. So I don't know if this is just a bloated sense of, yes, we got this, or if it's true, but 85% said that they felt like they were prepared for the re-entry to the workplace, while the remaining 15% said no. And are you personally ready to go back to the workplace? 74% said yes, and 36% said no. So we're going to ask another polling question here. Are you prepared, you personally prepared, to return to the workplace? Real simple, yes or no. If everybody can submit that, we can probably get a pretty quick response to this, because this is going to be an easy one. Okay, let's see if we get some results, and we'll see how our audience is feeling now about their preparedness to go back to the workplace. So 65% said that they're ready, and 35% said no. Okay, so that's interesting. That's a little lower than our statistics. I think a lot of this has to do with what is the office that you're returning to, and maybe not even so much what the office is, but where is your office? So we have a lot of offices all over the world: downtown London, downtown New York, downtown Chicago. Those people have to go through heavy congested areas to get into the office. And our Hong Kong office has already had to pull people back out and put them into quarantine because someone got sick in the building. So I think a lot of this has to do with what is your actual commute and what type of buildings are you accessing. So I want to keep going, and I want to get to some of our panelists here so we can ask. So Sachin, I want to ask you the next question. How many people are very anxious about potential exposure? We know that a lot of people are anxious about that. What do you think their willingness is to be in common spaces?
Sure. Thank you so much, Kay, and thank you for the introduction. I think it's a very interesting statistics that you've kind of brought about, Kay. If you ask this question into two parts, components, the willingness to go back to workplace, and second is, now given the choice to go back, how many have converted back? So if you see that statistics of how many have actually ventured out, going to the offices where the government has opened up the lockdown, you'll find the statistics much more lower, right? So that seems to be a little bit of contradiction, because we are enthused to go back, but we are still reluctant to go back. So clearly you can say that there is anticipation to go back, but there is anxiety which is adding to it, which is not allowing us to go back. So it's really, our enthusiasm is much more than our willingness. If push comes to shove, if you see the percentage right now where 65% said yes, now tomorrow if the lockdown opens up, this percentage might just toggle. And the simple reason for this is, why is this push and pull happening? It's an interesting understanding. The push is happening because we are social animals, right? Social wellness is part of our constitution.
We want to be together.
We want to be together. The fact that all these webinars have surged up is a proof enough that we want to be connected, right? So we didn't want to be in isolation, so these flurry of webinars kind of came in, right? But there's a pull back again saying, oh, is it going to be safe enough for me to go there, right? So you understand that the first time in history where personal wellness is in contradiction with social wellness, right? And they'll keep competing with each other, and they'll look upon the leaders of society to kind of guide them. And as you very rightly pointed out, Kay, the offices might be safe, their homes are safe, but there's a very big chunk which is the unsafe part, which is not within our control. And I think that's where the focus of the governments and the authorities should be lying, as you rightly pointed out, of how.
Absolutely. So, can I just say there's been a news break while we've been here, and basically we just heard that everybody is opening back up again on Monday. So on Monday, everybody needs to report to their offices. Okay. Wow. I'm just kidding. That didn't happen. But here's the test. Did you have heart palpitations when I said that, or were you like, yes? I'm willing to bet that most of us are like, yeah, sure, I'm ready to go back to the office. But then if somebody said, you have to go tomorrow, most of us would have heart palpitations. Matt, you look like you had heart palpitations when I said that. Right? Maybe a little bit. Yeah?
So absolutely.
I think all of us are a little anxious. I think that's the true test, right? Is in concept and in theory, we absolutely, I think, do. But I think what people are grossly underprepared for, Sachin, and you talked about this, is are people really ready, and the anxiety. There are some people that are gung-ho and can't wait, and then there's others that have a really super heightened sense of anxiety. And when you put all those people in the same spot, it's going to be really interesting. And the other thing I think is interesting, and we talked a little bit about this as well, we have to rethink everything. You know, we have been on autopilot to get to the office, and how I get my coffee and how I get in, and all of a sudden you're at your desk and you never even had to think about it. Everything we do now, we are going to have to think about, and that is going to be mentally and physically and psychologically exhausting for people. So we need to be prepared for what people are going to be going with. Okay, I'm gonna go back and share my screen again. And we're gonna look at one other question. Okay, so are the clients in your region looking at reducing densification of the space? Okay, 55% said yes by continuing to have the work from home program. 15% said they're going to have staggered shifts. 15% said that they're going to be looking at other means to get that physical distancing in the space. 10% say they're going to go to a 4-day work week. And 5% said, nope, our space is just fine the way that it is. So I'm going to throw it over to Bimal, who can talk a little bit from an architectural and a design perspective about will COVID-19 and the desire for increased physical distancing reverse the trend for people wanting to be in tighter quarters together and to reduce the square footage? What's going to happen? We want to hear what you're saying. There we go.
Thanks, Kate. I think it's a good question and very interesting to see the survey statistics which you just showed on your screen. But this question has a wider ramification, and probably it's not a very easy yes, no kind of answer. And the reason why I say that is if we look at the BC era, and I don't mean before Christ, before Corona era, there were certain things which were happening in terms of assigning square footage per human in the real estate industry. And in most of the part of the industry, except where the functions of that particular organization or business demanded certain more liberal allotment of per square feet per person, the trend globally from purely business perspective was downwards. And purely from a business perspective, that they wanted to kind of put in more and more humans per square foot. Now, already with that happening in the before Corona event, we were seeing challenges from a workplace strategy and the design strategy perspective about how do we balance inclusivity for people from a people perspective who are a little more introvert versus extrovert. I'm just giving one example. And in that more agile, more adaptive, more open environment, the extroverts were thriving. They were engaging more and more, and they were being more productive. But there are a lot of people who were introverts and who were probably not very comfortable with that kind of a work environment and the squeezing of the density per human happening. Now, that is one parameter. And so when you ask me this question, it's a kind of more look forward policy question I would look at it at, because as I heard from Krishna, many people didn't expect the work from home experiment to be so successful. And we kind of moved at warp speed, I would say, to test that globally, and there are results which are amazing. So organizations going forward, as I see as a designer and as a strategist, is that they are going to be evaluating how much portion of the business can actually move to work from home, whether it's 10%, 15%, 20%. Also evaluate the business needs. Also evaluate the client confidentiality matters, because in BFIR industry, there might be some restrictions which doesn't allow the work from home to be happening, and it has to happen within the premise of the client. So there are going to be a lot of dimensions which are going to come in, but what is going to happen is the moment that decision happens, there is going to be some release of real estate from an existing portfolio of our existing company. Now things could be looked at it differently and say, do I use this spare space because I move my 10% of my 15% of my workforce to work from home, and therefore I release some amount of real estate from my existing volume. And can I redistribute that in a little better way where we start addressing issues like well-being, experience, the introvert, extrovert kind of things which we talked about, and a lot more better spaces. So it's not necessary that the overall allotment of, say, if I'm setting up a 100,000 square feet project for 1,000 people at 100 square feet per person, tomorrow I will go and take 120 or 130,000. But within that 100,000, the allocation of space per human would definitely go up. And it's not purely coming out of the physical distancing. Physical distancing is a catalyst which would throw us in that direction, but then it would also take care of certain well-being aspects and certain other aspects which we are looking in the BC era. So that's how I look.
All right, so I want to pause here and I want to get every one of the panelists to weigh in. And Amit, I'm going to come to you first after I reframe this a little bit. This is a really critical point. This is something that all of our clients and every company right now is really looking at, is if people continue to work from home to some degree, can I reduce my physical real estate? And some companies have made really bold, sweeping statements about, we're going to get rid of 50% of it because people are going to work from home. Excuse me. Other people say, we're just going to spread people out and we're going to get physical distancing so that, because people are working from home. And Bimal, to your point, others have said, we're going to spread people out. We're going to use this, we're not going to reduce our square footage, but we're going to use it differently. We're going to give people more distance, and we're going to create and make the office more of a gathering point if more people are working from home. Okay. Now, and this gives me heart palpitations, because when people make sweeping statements and rush to those things, working from home has been around since 1970s, and there are many companies that have tried it, and then they ended up bringing their people back for a variety of reasons. Okay, so I look at this like we are still in the middle of an evolving situation, and most of our clients are proceeding very cautiously and trying to say, okay, what we do know is we'll probably have an increase of working from home, and we'll probably be using our space differently, but let's not rush to some things. And for some, it's an opportunity to reduce square footage. So I want to get everybody's opinion on this, because this is what every real estate person and every company is thinking right now, because the C-suite and the CEOs, and we've seen this from multiple CEOs that have said, wow, that experiment of working from home went great. Why do we need all this real estate, right? That is the question that everybody's getting. So Amit, I want to start with you, and then I want to go around to all the panelists. Can you just give me a quick sense of how do you feel? What do you think companies are going to be doing going forward? Do you think they're going to be giving up their space? Do you think they're going to be holding it and using it differently? What do you think?
Okay, is that question to me?
I'm going to ask Amit first.
Okay.
Hi, thanks. Okay, thanks for first of all giving an overview from your side and kind of anchoring the whole, kind of putting us all together. Right. No, surely. I mean, we've been hearing various voices at this stage, and the fact is that we are, as I said, there is 3 stages. There is pre-COVID, into COVID, and post-COVID. So a lot which we are hearing right now is while we are sailing this phase, which is, being with the COVID. So some of the voices which we hear now are not a reflection of how the world will be in 5 to 6 months from now. So it is while we are into it, it's a different world altogether. As you rightly said, that most work from home or most realignment has been under government instructions, primarily to curtail the spread of the virus, or it's more like a medical emergency. So it's like curfew in some sense. So human behaviors in a curfew situations is not a reflection of how the humans will behave in a free world. So a lot of inferences which is coming right now is because we are all confined under certain limitations. It's well-known fact that everyone enjoys going back to work because as humans, that's what we are designed for. It's more true for India, because I said it before that what's true about India is very interesting. Last 20 years, this country has been growing and only 6 cities have grown. There's not a 7th which has emerged in the last 20 years, which means that the immigration to the major metro cities has been consistently very high. There are cities like where the workforce is about 60 to 70% of the workforce is outside from the city. So there are these nodal mega cities, and then there are many tier 2 and tier 3 cities which are in the close proximity of 300 to 500 kilometers. So people come there to work. Some of them go back once in a month, some of them go back once in fortnight, and some of them go back once in a quarter. So they are actually not belonging to the city, but they're coming to these mega cities very simply to work with bigger companies, to work in the flashy buildings, to kind of have a sense of aspiration. And that's what has been driving India last 20 years or so. So I doubt there will be, with this short scenario, what we are going through, will have any reversal trend of the aspirations of the younger generation or younger workforce, which is happening. The second is, we've seen just pre-COVID, how the workforces have been evolved. They've become far more human, far more collaborative, far more a reflection of the human behavior. And that's why, you have seen more amenities coming in, more interiors reflecting collaborative spaces, and all that in the last 5 years, which has happened was purely based on a lot of surveys of what the employees want. So employees had given a verdict in the last 5 to 6 years as what is it they want from the new buildings, what is it that they want from the interior spaces. So I doubt any of that would be any change, because that was when they had all the freedom to choose. This is what they've chosen in the last 5 to 6 years, and that's how you see how the new age buildings are substantially different and all that. Having said that, current scenario, yes, we are going through almost like a medical emergency. Governments have opened up, have reflected signs of opening up the economy and the business in India. Definitely, this has come with very cautious regulations and guidelines. So it's for employers and for the employees, everyone is sensitive about that. If you go back to the work, there is a sense of risk, right? So we have to acknowledge that, both from the employee's perspective as well as from the employer's perspective. But at the same time, then there are solutions which are in our facility management and a building management world, and some of these we have to innovate. It's something like, when you go to a high specialty hospital, there are patients around. When you go to an ICU within a hospital, there are patients around. But to that extent, the mitigation is also, one raises the bar in terms of the mitigation also, and that's purely science around it. So what all of us needs to do, and which is what we're doing at DLF also, is raising the bar in terms of ecosystem management. Make it highly, safe, and acknowledging there can be risk from various touch points. There can be various risks from people coming too close to each other. There can be risks from, certain other, close proximity within elevators or other factors. So consciously, there are strong guidance which has been, drafted and given. One is to start with from the government itself. The ministries have laid out very clear guidance of social distancing. Ministries have laid out the guidance which actually vary city to city on the percentage of the staff which can come to the office, and that's a reflection of the perception and the data which allows to kind of judge the risk, and that's how you'll see a variance there. I mean, Gurgaon has 33% of the workforce which is allowed. Hyderabad now has 100%. Kolkata has 50%, and Chennai has 10%. So it just shows that it is not one size fits all. Now it's getting deeper into specific locations to build those ideas. And then there are very specific guidelines to the developers, to the companies, as well as to the employees themselves. So there are 3 set of categories of guidelines which are there. What is it that the workspace providers have to do? What is it the companies have to do, or the organizations have to do, and what the employees have to do? So at this stage, what we are consciously doing is we are following the government guidelines. We have been very highly interacting with our customers so as to know beyond the government guidelines what are the sensitivity issues so that we can address it. So, those are getting reflected in our SOPs for returning to work. And at the same time, a very strong, I would say, monitoring system, because social distancing has to be taught in some way. It is very simply
Absolutely.
that, when we take a flight, every time we are reminded to buckle up, right? So imagine we are reminded once and then, or after 3 months.
That's why we're going to have signs everywhere in our workplaces, right? Right. Yeah, absolutely. Those subtle reminders. Yeah. So Amit, I want to get Sasha and Krishna's. Yeah, I want to get Sasha and Krishna to weigh in on this question that we have on the table. Gentlemen, do you believe that companies are going to be giving up real estate if more people work from home, or will they keep the real estate and just use it differently? Sasha, why don't we start with you?
Okay, thank you so much, Kay. I think, Kay, you've rightly kind of pinned it. It's important to understand that anytime a change happens, people have a very panic-driven decision-making process, right? And unless you test it with time, no decision can become predictive in nature, right? So I think people are swayed in two different extremes at this point of time. One type of people have become too gung-ho, saying things are going to be back to normal, we're going to have the vaccine in place, and we're going to be, so that's one extreme. The second extreme of people are saying, wow, this is fantastic, lessen the real estate, but we will, as we go ahead, we'll have to test this with time, because no decision that is not tested with time is sustainable. Because very soon people who kind of occupy the space in a different way, will come back with economic reasons as well, right? They'll suddenly say the space is not economical enough. So I think at this point of time, it's most prudent to utilize the space differently, and as time passes, create some sense of predictability into it so that you can use it even more efficiently as you grow ahead, right? But to make knee-jerk, panic-driven decisions on either extremes is not advisable, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. Krishna, what do you think? Are companies going to hold their real estate, or are they going to give it up if people work from home?
Okay, I think we should not restrict the decision purely to work from home. This pandemic has not only made us work from home, but it also has an economic impact overall. So I think it's going to be a combination. Let's not look at it in isolation, saying that work from home is going to drive reduction of space. It's a very myopic view of looking at things. I think like one of our from somebody from the audience, Manish Sethi, has actually put it here. It's absolutely a well-rounded up decisions companies are going to take. Yes, it is an opportunity. Let us not make no mistake about it. Yes, work from home has told us that this is like possible to work. How do we use the space is we are in reactive mode currently, which is reacting to the pandemic. We're getting everybody home, getting up the infrastructure, allowing people to link up from home and execute business, right? We haven't gone to the stage of thinking, how are we going to use my existing space? So maybe the immediate reaction, I don't call it a knee-jerk, Sachin. It does look like it, but I think this is something where companies have been trying to push in this direction for quite some time. It's just that the pandemic has sort of given an approval stamp saying that, hey guys, you know what? It's possible to work from home. So all those data that you were throwing upon to the business saying that why don't this many percentage, how do we use the seat better? We all have been talking about utilization all along. It's not a new subject. And work from home is also a new subject, Okay, you just mentioned for a company like us. So I think it's going to be more of a rounded off decision, the opportunity, the economic sense, and the overall package is what's going to decide the percentage of space that's going to get given up. And if things improve, business improve, more people get hired, you go back and take space. It's not like these spaces are going to disappear, or it's not like people are going to give up everything and everybody's going to work from home. There is going to be this median, and it's going to be a rounded decision based on 2-3 factors.
Well, we think it's going to take a little bit of time for all of this to settle out. So I want to bring the audience into this discussion a little bit, because we're actually getting some great questions and some great chat. So Manish wrote to the panelists, and I want to read this out loud to everybody just so that they can hear this. All companies which are hit hard by the corona pandemic will certainly find this a good opportunity to give up excess resources. We have already seen layoffs. Similarly, there will be layoffs, lots of real estate as well, now in the majority of sectors. Basically, at the end of the day, we have to remember that this is all these companies, it's a business, and at the end of the day, it's about money. So if companies continue to be hit hard and there's an economic ramification, then not only will they potentially lay people off, but they're going to be looking at real estate as well. And I want to get another question that's in here, and we're going to do, everybody got the thumbs up. I want to see everybody's hands on the panelist right now. We're going to do a thumbs up or a thumbs down question, all right? So I want to see everybody's thumbs. Put your fists up, guys. We're all going to respond to this question at the same time. Somebody said, okay, that's nice. Are you ready to go back to work? The real question is, are you ready to send your kids back to school? Yes or no? No? No. Yes, Bimal is ready to send his kids back to school. I have 5 kids. They're all older. So yeah, maybe I'm ready to send them back. It's a good point though. Also, Bimal, just so you know, we have several people that love your BC comment and are going to steal it. So that's already been stolen. But we also have a PV, post-vaccine. So one of the panelists asked, or one of the people in the audience asked the question to your response to this. What do you think is going to happen post-vaccine? Do you still think that there's going to be the social distancing? What's the lasting ramifications of this, right? Do we think that this will continue, the social distancing and physical distancing in the workplace? Or once there's a vaccine, will that change it? Will more people come back? Will we densify again? What's going to happen PV?
So, Kate, a couple of perspectives, and there again there cannot be any one definite yes and no for this. As we have learned from the current situation, and the aspects of well-being and public health have come up actually in the graph of priority and importance in the workspace design because of this current situation. And how we would look at it is probably this situation is more of a catalyst rather than just all of us getting into a mindset that of maybe a fear psychosis that it is going to be kind of a game changer from all perspectives of whatever thought processes and evolvement which has happened in the workspaces or all the industry. So a couple of scenarios which I can draw across is there will be a set of companies who would take this event as a catalyst and apply their mind to what they were not doing, or maybe a little course correction from the perspective of well-being and experiences at workspace. And they would probably then derive, and those would be probably companies who would be at the top of the graph, or probably who would be leading the pack. Because as we walk into future, those aspects are going to be more and more critical for every employee, more critical than what we saw even in the BC era, as I would put it. So there will be certain set of companies who would do that and move in the direction. There would be some businesses whose business sense or business numbers probably won't allow them to have that kind of luxury, as something Krishna was also mentioning about in terms of, and those might be industries which are maybe pure BPO kind of industry, which are not probably research and development or product development. So again, it depends on what kind of function the company is doing. And the moment those kind of companies get a sense of security, or they are away from the fear psychosis, they might make a business decision and say, guys, we need to go back to what we were because the business can't afford it. So that is another way of looking at it from that perspective.
So I have another question, and I'm going to throw it out to Amit as the developer. Right. So the question for you is, do you see commercial/office space and residential spaces coming together in the same campus so that people can avoid traffic?
Tough one, okay. There is no evidence in the past to reflect that. But definitely, I think one of the long-term impact of what's happening now, there would be aspirations of close to home offices, and hub and spoke can emerge out of this larger thing. Now, whether that is close to home does not necessarily mean within the complex, but it can be within a within a 15 to 20 minutes driving time formats in cities, and that will also vary city to city. The cities where the traveling distances to work can take 1.5 hours or so and kind of have long distances, which is typically in India, Mumbai and Bangalore, can have a hub and spoke as a combination. Largely other cities where the driving time is within 45 minutes, even for an hour, you would go extra 30 minutes and go to office where everyone is, rather than trying to be, kind of limited on certain purpose. So I'll come back to the core focus. The focus of the future will all have to keep on answering as to why go to office. And I'll put it in perspective. I was talking to a large customer of ours who were doing a large transaction built to suit, and we were also wanted to understand that, is there a change in thought process? And we were surprised that there's negligible change in thought process, simply because they were anyhow ahead of the thought process of why we need office, and the very fact that this new building, its design is that to have a very collaborative workspace, and the reason why it was getting built to suit is not only the interiors reflect that whole collaboration and energy, the whole building reflects that. So which means that the very reason why people will continue to go to work is to have cross-functional interactions, to have cross-functional engagements. As a result, through those deeper conversations, the real problems are addressed. And the businesses in future will survive only by addressing real problems. I had this question when I was there in San Francisco, and I asked Salesforce this question as why you're in the middle of the city while a lot of other companies are in Mountain View, and said we have to address the real people problems. So we can't be an off location in Mountain View and start thinking of what the real problems to be addressed. So they are right down in San Francisco, and the whole building atrium and lobby opens up to the street. It's purposely designed with a very high glass, with no barrier to the street, so that the solution providers who work in those offices can actually see the real problem and can experience the real problems, right? So, and we've seen in the real world that a lot of organizations which forget work from home, a lot of organizations which have taken decisions to have campuses much further away from in the suburban locations. And we've seen in the last 4 to 5 years how there is a comeback to the city center. Same reason that the moment you get isolated, there is a risk of getting out of business because you've lost connect, because the dynamism on the world is so high that you've got to be real-time connected, real-time evolving solutions, and the companies have to keep on real-time evolving their softwares or services or products and all that. So there is a risk of employees getting isolated if you're kind of in their thought process. There's a risk of cross collaboration. There is a risk of you're not close to your customer in the real center of the heart of the cities and all that stuff. So I think a lot of this will come back to real fundamentals.
So Amit, let me
it's happening back.
Yeah. So let me throw out what we're seeing in some other parts of the world, places like London, New York City, San Francisco, some big cities around the world. What we're starting to hear is people that have located their real estate in downtown areas are probably going to be the last people bringing their people back, because just the commute to get to the office is going to be a massive challenge in the elevators. The other challenge here is if you've got 1,000 employees and they're all in one location and someone in that building gets sick and they're exposed, everybody might have to go back into quarantine for 14 days. So an old concept is coming back to life of a hub and spoke model, where your downtown location, you probably still want that presence, but it might be the corporate hub, the gathering space, the innovation center, the client engagement area, and certain people that live in the cities work there. Then you have smaller spokes in the suburbs or on the outposts, so that people don't have to commute into that, and not all of your population is in one place, so that if somebody gets infected, your whole population goes down. Because the challenge I think that we're seeing is if people don't want to take mass transit, and for cities like London and New York that rely, Tokyo, Hong Kong, that rely on mass transit, if people don't want to take that, they really don't have a way to get to their offices unless they drive, which would make commuting horrendous, absolutely horrendous. And at that point, it will force people to work from home because they're not going to be able to get to the office. So there's lots of different things that are happening. Before we go to the next question, Amit, though, I have a real quick question, and I want you to answer in a percentage, because they said, what percentage of your tenants have asked for some rent relief? Who's come to you and said, hey, we can't pay our rent, or can we have a reprieve for a few months, or can we get a reduction? What percentage of your tenants, Amit, have come to you and asked you for that?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, so we collected about 90% rental of its own in the month of April, and I think we are just in about May 22nd, and my team says it's already 80% collected. So I think, in all fairness, very few customers have come back on this, and there were certain identified sectors which got impacted more, and those customers have come back more than others. Those were largely airlines, some co-working players, and I would say hospitality linked players. So there were a few industry specific where the entire business is dependent upon a few servicing the industries which got impacted. That reflection has been more.
So what do you think, 20%?
Largely otherwise.
30%? What percentage?
10%.
20%?
10%.
10%. Oh, that's good. Good for you.
Yeah. Also because we had most of our customers, have been like global US captives, and they've kind of have sheets. I think they've kind of handled our cost in this downtown, the shutdown area, where we reflected reducing our operating costs, and that was a self-initiative, and that benefit was forwarded to across the board all customers pan-India. So we took a self-initiative, kind of a drive to kind of reduce the operating costs. So I said, what is it that we can do? Let's do that, and that's been done across the board.
Got it. Okay, so only 10% of your customers have come back and asked for any rent relief. So guys, we now know who's buying dinner for everybody tonight, virtually, I guess. Okay, so I'm going to go back. We're going to continue on our path here, and we're going to get to some of the other questions. One of the questions was somebody asked me to go back to this slide. So I'm going to go back to the reducing of the densification slide, because there was an interest in these statistics, and maybe we popped through that too quickly. So I'm going to put that one back up just for a quick second. And we'll make sure that everybody has access to the recording and to the slides as well. All right, so we asked this question. Okay, so the next stat that we found in our polling is what policies are being enacted to prepare for the return to the workplace. So what we found is that 30% of companies are going to be requiring people to wear a mask. And by the way, that might go up based on, Amit, what you were talking about. There are government guidelines, there are building guidelines, so that might be higher, and it really depends. 22% anticipate temperature checks at entry. 16% said that they don't foresee any. 13% said that there'd be health checks, whether it's a questionnaire or something along that lines. 10% said that there would be gloves that would be required. And then a smaller percentage said Wi-Fi triangulation of movement. Okay, so let's explain that last one for a minute and what some of the differences are. This and how people have reacted to the virus, it is really the big difference in the numbers. If you look at the numbers from South Korea versus the United States, that both reported the same they both had their first case of COVID-19 on the same day, but they've gone on very, very different trajectories. South Korea has had very few cases, very few deaths, because they were very, very aggressive in temperature checks and quarantining and contact tracing. Where other countries that were slower to do so have paid the price to do that. You can look at what's going on in Brazil right now, and seen how it's basically kind of raging out of control in a lot of cities in Brazil because of this. And so in China, what's happening is that they have embraced technology. Everybody, there's not a lot of boundaries between personal information and not. And so they are using Wi-Fi triangulation to identify who might have come into contact. So on everyone's phone, there is a QR code, and it's either green, yellow, or red. Green means that you're not sick, they don't believe you're sick, and you haven't been exposed. Yellow means you might have been exposed, and red means there's a high probability. So I leave my house in the morning and I'm green. I go to get my Starbucks on my way to the office, and when I get to my building, all of a sudden it's yellow because somebody in that Starbucks went to a temperature check and they found out that they had a high temperature. So anybody, they use Wi-Fi triangulation to identify anybody else that was in that Starbucks within a certain period of time could have been infected, and now their status has changed. And if I was in the Starbucks at the same time as that person, I would go to red. So they are very, very aggressive in using that. Now, there are huge parts of the world that are very concerned about privacy and or just don't have that capability, and so that's not happening. But this question about how people are returning really is going to be pivotal onto how do we track and contain and control this going forward. So I want to throw this question to Amit. What considerations are you all taking for your buildings and your properties to account for the re-entry into the workplace? What are you seeing and what are you all doing in your facilities?
Yeah. So, thanks. Right. So thanks. Okay. So, as I said, you have to, in a current situation, work almost like a regulator because, one is communication. So it starts from communication, right? Government has been issuing guidelines. So those guidelines have to be well understood by each of the organizations. So we realize that just that a paper which government has circulated is not good enough. We all need to connect. So a lot of communication happened. We did individual organization-wise Zoom calls to explain and understand that this is what the government has asked for. This is what we're doing on the ground. Then we realized we need to simplify some of that. So because the government circulars are very descriptive, so we kind of had SOPs which had more reflection of photographs of what we are doing at all format. And literally the entire journey of right from the entrance of an employee into the campus, from the entrance gate to the atrium, to the point when you're boarding the elevator, to the point as within the elevator, to the point up to the tenant premises is mapped, right? And then there are detailing of sanitation in each of the areas. For example, common areas, there are guidelines of what sanitation requirements would be. There are guidelines we are also following beyond what the government guidelines, trying to get much deeper into it, into some of our areas in the amenities area. Common areas, surface cleaning becomes very important. Elevators, we are trying to bring in almost a touchless experience and a very high level of sanitization, because elevators have been identified as one of the areas where there could be a potential risk. So you acknowledge that risk, and then one regulate in terms of the number of people who would go to the elevators. Most government guidelines itself has said that not more than 4 person per elevators. Then there are surface disinfectants which are used all over in the common areas. And then social distancing is regulated by the government, but as I said, it's like managing the flight takeoff and the landing. Same way, the entire service staff has been trained so that while the employees are in the common areas, they are reminded, one, to wear the mask, second, maintain social distances, because generally there is a tendency when when people are coming back to work after, about 45-50 days, they tend to catch up and have conversations and all that. So we've trained our teams to keep on reminding people to maintain that 6 feet distance as rightly regulated by government and some of the medical facility. Likewise, in the vehicle management and vehicle movement, there's a lot of areas, in fact, government guidelines itself require a sanitization of the vehicles at the entry gate itself. So we kind of have those sanitization system installed at the entry gates. And then, likewise, there is complete preparedness in case after having all the preparation done, a single case does appear. So there is a protocol on a response to that single identified case, reporting to the organization and taking other protocols as recommended by the government. There's a whole protocol which is aligned. Ambulances have been aligned and kind of kept ready to manage a single case reporting as an infection. So, a lot of that is there. In addition, as you rightly said, the technology is used through the fact that the government itself has made it mandatory. There's an app in India called Arogya Setu, which is on a similar format. It works through a GPS system tracking. And there has to be a green pass, which has to be shown at the entrance gate itself by every employee entering there on a daily basis. There also we kind of figured out that sometimes people become smarter and you'd be surprised, we figured out that someone takes a screenshot and showing every day a green pass. I don't know whether that's happened in New York or not. So when we figured out that the catch is we have to open the app in front of us and not show a screenshot.
Oh, tricky. Yeah. So Amit, one of the questions from the audience, and I'm going to answer it for you, is: are you all following the government guidelines, or are you going above and beyond? And clearly, you all are going above and beyond the government guidelines, really to make sure that we have ultimate safety in the spaces that you guys are doing, right? Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to keep going because we have a few other questions that we want to get to, and we're going to pull in some of our other panelists as well. So what other ways might workplace be redesigned PV post-vaccine, this is before a vaccine is available. So increased natural ventilation, contactless doors and door handles, hot desking for staff. And there's a big debate about whether we should be sharing desks or not sharing desks. If you share desks, they can actually have a clean desk policy and be cleaned, but then other people are using it. So the jury is still kind of out. But this is what our survey responded are the attributes that people are looking at. More collaborative space, staff working remotely, less density in the workplace, enhanced sanitation and air filter screening, and more screening in the open areas or enclosed spaces. So I want to go back to one or two of these points on here. In Asia, when they went back, a lot of people had unassigned seating and it was free address. And they thought that people would not like that they would want their own desk so that they could limit the touching. And so they assigned seats for people. What they found is that people didn't like that, because think about when you walk into a doctor's office, if somebody tells you you have to sit next to somebody, but there's 5 desks that are open over there, you want to be able to choose and pick. And so what they found is that people actually wanted the option and choice to sit wherever they wanted to, where they felt safe, versus being told where to sit. So some interesting statistics coming back from our polling questions. So the very first one was increased ventilation in mechanical systems. So there's a lot of debate out there about the role of mechanical systems, HVAC systems in buildings. And I know there's been some discussion. I will say that in Asia, the first buildings that were occupied in China and in Hong Kong were ones that had operable windows. Most people have said if we can get more fresh air into the space, that's highly advantageous. However, you also need to think about the temperature where you live, and you need to think about the air quality, because in some parts of the world, outdoor air is not fresh, is actually worse. So I want to throw this open to a debate and to pull in Sachin and all the others. How is this, what's happening in India regarding HVAC systems?
So thank you, Kay. I think HVAC is a very touchy topic. I think the way pathogens work, there are obviously by physical touch, by coughing and sneezing, and by air particles which are in suspension mode, which is not right through direct contact. And that's where the HVAC system kind of comes into play. And ASHRAE has obviously been the guidelines for most of the debates that have been discussed so far. And the whole philosophy that has been made is into three components: trap it, kill it, and flush it, right? So that's been the three mantra for HVAC. So when you say trap it, you trap the pathogens through multiple filters. So there's a debate about HEPA filters, that is about MEPC 9 filters, so different kinds of filters which will trap this. There is kill it is the second step that is being proposed, when you kind of kill the pathogens by UVC, whether it's at the coil level, AHU level, or within its ducting level. And third, obviously, step is talked about is of flushing it out, which means improving your air circulation, air exchange, and fresh air intake, right? Now, these are the obvious ways, and of course, to supplement, to complement that, humidity control, that's going to be very, very crucial, because we understand that humidity is going to play a very crucial role in kind of managing this whole process, right? So a range of 40 to 60% is kind of nominated. So these are the ways in which I think most of the companies are kind of coping with HVAC ventilation system, right? But I think there is another group of thought that is looking beyond that, right? So this is obviously, we'll have to adapt. This is an adaptation philosophy of how to make it more congenial, which is this three-step process: tap it, kill it, flush it, right? But I think going forward, I think there is a need, personally, there's a need to look at HVAC system a little bit more inventive in nature, rather than just re-innovating the existing system, specifically because HVAC system constitutes to 40% of the power usage of a building complex. It has a lot of implications in the environment and the ecology as well. So I think there will be a push for a longer perspective, this is post-vaccine perspective, to kind of look at HVAC in a very holistic way, or kind of inventive way, rather, I would like to say, because these systems will work, will be fine, but I think people's needs for health and safety and hygiene will be much more sensitive now going forward. So I think this is the kind of two types of discussions that are happening. One which is short-term, mid-term kind of analysis, where let's make the best of what we have. And I think the next level of discussion is happening is, can we do completely different or inventive with the system, where we give the cooling, where we give the care, but not affect the ecology and the environment as well. So I think people have to now rethink the whole strategy of HVAC from being comfort and convenience to being care, right? So I think, that's the whole thought process that's being kind of formulated with HVAC.
Okay, good. I'm gonna go to our next question or our next session, because I want to get Bimal in here to ask one of the questions that we're starting really to see. And I'm going to give you the polling results as far as what are the modifications do we envision being made to the current workplace to address this physical distancing requirement. So 30% of people around the world are saying that they are blocking out or having alternative desk being used. So, maybe every other desk. 16% are reorienting the work points. 16% are installing some kinds of screens. 16% are saying that nothing is needed. They're not going to do anything at all. And then, we have a kind of a variety of other things that are happening. Some are converting back to unassigned seating. Bimal, can you share a little bit about what you are seeing, right? There's lots of companies that are debating if enclosed offices and high-paneled workstations might return. Do we need sneeze guards everywhere in the space? What do we need to do? And is this the death of the open office? So I'm going to throw it over to you.
Thanks, Kay. So there are three parts to that question, what you have just put, but let me kind of put it from a perspective, and then I'll say why I believe so that was not going to happen. So yes, probably this is not seen as a death of the open office, at least from our perspective as designers and workplace strategies. It's not that it's going to go 360-degree turnaround, 180-degree turnaround, and we are going to walk in the opposite direction. And it's not going to be a taboo to kind of be talking about open office. Yes, probably from a midterm perspective, there might be a client mindset or the end user mindset because they are feeling insecure. That is how it is going to work. But and why do we say so? Because the way the workplaces has evolved in the past decade and more is on a couple of parameters which has contributed to its evolvement to the present state as we use them today and before we start talking about reentry and all those things. And the main parameters were that we moved from the industrialization age to the information technology age. That was a kind of big impact in the way we work. And therefore, there was certain kind of evolvement in the workspaces, physical evolvement in terms of parameters, which we saw. The other key impact was that the entire hierarchical way of working, and more so from a factory-driven kind of line processing way of working, the way of working changed to more collaborative, more engaging, more thinking together as a team. And that was another point which impacted the workspace design, which kind of we see today. The third point which I would like to put down is the demographics. It played a big part into the kind of agile, adaptive, work from anywhere kind of workplaces which we are seeing today, which the millennials and the Gen Zs are using it. And all these parameters which contributed to the evolvement of the workspace are not going to vanish. That part of the human evolution and the way we are going to do business now from information technology, we are moving into the AI age. So there are going to be some kind of changes which are going to be driven out of in the workspace design from this perspective. And therefore I say that probably it's not a 180-degree turnaround. But yes, what this situation has brought to our notice and awareness is that the physical distancing, as we call it, and then I'm kind of not in for using the social distancing word as against physical distancing because they can be interpreted differently.
Agreed.
And physical distancing being the norm now, because of the awareness which this event has thrown to us, how do we take this as one more additional parameter and reinterpret the workspace as we lay out in planning and in look, feel, and in MEP services and in kind of making it more well-being and towards better hygiene environments is going to be the thought process. So from that perspective, that's why I say that it's not going to be death of open office, because we have to look at that more holistically and move from there. And
Perfect.
Amit was talking about technology, and I second that completely. That technology is going to be a big driver into creating this whole thing of well-being experience, sanitization, etc. as we look forward. Now,
Perfect. That's a good answer. I want to make sure that I want to get to a few more of our questions here. So,
sure.
Krishna, I want to ask you the next question, and I'm going to share some of the results that we have from this survey. We're going to skip that one. I'm going to go to what are the priorities for redesigning the workplace until a vaccine is available. So from our survey, the number one priority was employee safety. The second one was the ability to work from home versus returning to the office. Safety in the office, cleanliness of the physical space, physical distancing to Bimal's part, shielding from others, reducing the touch points, increased anxiety and dealing and addressing with that, and the appropriate operational protocols. So, Krishna, what do you all see from your perspective? What is IBM concerned about, and what are you all doing really to help get the workplace prepared for the return of people?
Kay, I think the points that you put up here are sort of almost a standard checklist and exactly in the same order. Employee safety is topmost of the priority. It's at the end of the day, it's one of the main forces that drives the whole industry, all the organizations. So from a industry perspective, from a organization perspective, I think the first point is employee safety, and every other aspect is how do we get the office to satisfy the employee concerns in terms of hygiene and safety is entirely if I put it in a single line, this is what we are working towards. And how we go about doing it has all the components that you just said, something like an IT touch-free, how do we make the office as touchless as possible, right from, dispensers where we don't have to touch to get your hand sanitizers, to the soap dispensers, to everything else that can be in a touchless motion. I think that's the number one, because at the end of the day, what you want to give is employee a comfort and a satisfaction that when they return to office, and if they return to office, this place is great for you, this place is good for you. I think we are bending over backwards, making sure everything is in order along those lines. And to the extent that, from a psychological aspect, we are even having a standard practice of now having cleaning and sanitization done in front of employees. Earlier, it used to be a trend where we used to do it when employees are not there. The moment they leave, the back-end sanitization work starts. Today, it almost seems to be a norm where we are getting recommendations from the industry experts saying, hey guys, you know what? We should have at least a couple of cleaning sessions happening when the employees are around. It gives them a mental satisfaction of saying, you know what? This is getting clean. The table is getting clean. The telephone is getting clean. The seats are getting clean. I think that's where we are heading, Kay. And the whole aspect is around making the employee comfortable and ensuring their health and hygiene is topmost priority.
All right, so that leads us perfectly into our next series of questions that we're going to ask. So, how do you foresee the need for increased hand washing and sanitation being accommodated in the workspace? Right? That's a big question that I think a lot of people are asking today. And then with the heightened sensitivity, as Krishna was speaking about earlier, to cleanliness and the need for improved sanitation to reduce contamination, how do you see the use of technology being integrated into the workplace? And will we see an increased focus on LEED and or WELL certification as companies are starting to seek healthier spaces? So I'm going to turn it over to the panel again. And I'm going to start with Sasha. Why don't you weigh in on what you are seeing regarding the sanitation aspect?
I think sanitation for sure in the period that we kind of are in right now, sanitation, personal hygiene, and physical distancing are going to be the rule of the game, right? And I think it's also going to be complemented, will have to get complemented with a sense of mindfulness and emotional connect, right? Because if it's purely, of course, the first focus will be health and safety. But I think to make the office more engaging and appealing for people to return back, I think as Krishna mentioned, it will have to be comfortable. It will have to have the sense of mindfulness. It will have to have the sense of an inviting factor. I think that's going to be really the focus going forward. Over to you, Krishna.
Perfect. Thank you. And Amit, we have a question from the audience that's asking about how are you dealing with all of that on a job site? So when construction starts on some of these projects, how are you enabling physical distancing, and how are you keeping, everybody, the sanitation and all the things that they're touching? So what are you doing on a job site to really kind of mitigate those risks?
Yeah, so same as operations in offices. So there are elaborate SOPs which have been created for construction restart. One is the labor back to work is not in full force, so obviously the density is less. Second, very high level of PPE use and safety gear use. And and fortunately for us, we as a company have been very highly sensitive to safety, with DuPont being a safety consultant for the last 7-8 years, and kind of all our sites go for annual certification of British Safety Council safety. So we understand the culture of safety a lot more. But at this stage, it is also about social distancing and safety more, and it's a health safety here. Most construction sites, when they will start, the laborers would be living in those areas itself and not go back to home and come back every day. That will be very important, which means the responsibility of the developer further increases in the overall health, and wellness of the employees from the end-to-end perspective. Because if you take care of them during the day and then they go back and come back, then that's not good enough. So fortunately, most construction sites are isolated campuses which have the ability of some of the workforce staying there. That's one. Second, fortunately for us, we took the decision that all our future buildings would be steel structure format. So by default, it becomes more mechanical and less labor intensive, if I may say. So that would be another trend going forward. We would see, at least in India, where it will take time for a lot of contracted labor to come back to the work. So the steel structure still by default are kind of require lesser labor. So it will be a lot more of hygiene requirements, very strong safety checks, very strong health checkups on site, and taking complete ownership of the workers who are working inside. Regularly temperature check, their overall symptoms check, as said, and have to have a data around it. So even technology will play a role in that fashion as well, because you need to have a data regulation. In true sense, if you ask me, the way in a work site used to happen, like a work permit, which is for a risky job done allowed for a day basis. So increasingly, the concept of each of these areas will be a daily check, which allows a 1 day of work and a check every morning. So it will be that level of regulation which will come in.
Good answer. Thank you. And I want to thank the audience for sending us all their questions that we've been able to interweave. I have one last statistic that I want to share from our global poll that we took. And so the last question really, or the last thought on this is going to be, what are we seeing as the lasting ramifications of COVID-19 on the workplace? What is likely to increase, what is likely to decrease, and what don't we think is going to change at all? And so here are the stats that we're seeing, and you can see, remote work, physical distancing, enhanced cleaning, those clean desk policies, all of those things we see a big uptake on. So what I want to do, gentlemen, in 30 seconds or less, I want you to share your final thoughts as far as what do you think the lasting ramification, if you had to pick one or two things, would be. So Bimal, I'm going to start with you. What do you foresee as the lasting ramifications of COVID-19?
I would conclude it as this whole thing is going to kind of increase the speed of digital transformation, which is happening in the field of real estate. And by saying that, what I mean is technology is going to be the key driver into getting integrated with all aspects of our workspace and to heighten the well-being, to heighten the experience part of the employee, to heighten and give them a more safety perspective of mindset, and also probably from the public health use cases perspective. So technology is going to be the key driver in this era of digital transformation, and we'll see much more embedded use of it.
Good answer. Thank you. Krishna, what do you think is the lasting ramifications, or what's going to be around for a long time because of COVID-19?
Okay, I think it's innovation. It's innovation about how you're going to conduct your business going forward, how you're going to have your space, how much space, how you're going to use it. I think everything is going to be viewed totally with a different lens, and everything is about innovating the way you deliver business going forward, innovating the way you deliver your space and how you use your space. It sort of ties back into Bimal's point of using technology, but I'm using a more broader phase of innovation, because it's just not going to be about your space. It's almost going to be about every single thing that you think about. Right?
Yeah, I love that answer. It's a good answer. Thank you. Sasha, what do you think is the lasting ramification of COVID-19?
In my opinion, besides what Amit and Bimal has already mentioned, I think we would be re-looking at wellness from a very, very different perspective, right? We always looked at wellness as an optional perspective. I think it'll become a compulsive perspective. Ooh. And wellness from three perspectives, not just, it'll be a global wellness where we'll be more sensitive and compassionate to the environment, a social wellness where we'll almost treat humans the way they're to be treated, and a personal wellness. I think all these three aspects, we suddenly being distant away from each other, have really valued human touch, right? And I think that's the time when we look at wellness from a completely different perspective, from a global wellness, social wellness, as well as personal wellness. So I think we're going to really look at wellness from a different perspective, not as an option, but as a compulsion.
And very human-centric.
And very human-centric. It cannot be any different from any other safety norms of fire and security.
Right.
Wellness will become an integrated part of it.
Perfect. And Amit, you have about 30 seconds to answer that question. What do you think is going to be the lasting ramification of COVID-19?
Yeah, so definitely, I think it's already covered. So I will only add more on digitization, but I will add the word called analytics. I think a lot of us figured out in the current world when we're operating from work that because our businesses are less digitized, we kind of got into the depth of it, whether it's customer centric, customer connect, customer depth, our operations analytics, and other factors. So I think once we go back, it will be implementation, a lot of digitization solutions across businesses will kind of be a big awakening call.
Right, good answer. So I think in the end, what we kind of just want to wrap up with, now that we've talked about all these different aspects, is that we do truly believe that we can design spaces that bring us together, but also keep us safely apart. Innovation, technology, human-centric focus, all of those things are going to be lasting ramifications from COVID-19. So I want to thank the panelists for all of your thoughts, and I want to turn it back over to Kushner, who is going to wrap us up.
Thanks, Kay.
Thank you, Kay.
Thank you. Tushner, is there anything you want to conclude with or end with as far as sending people the description or anything else that you want to end with?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming on this panel. And I'm really thankful to Kay for coming and making a time and sharing her research and global insights. And thank you, audience, for joining this great session. And we request you to be in touch on LinkedIn. Please follow our LinkedIn page. You get all the videos, reports, and everything on the LinkedIn page. And we will be sharing our upcoming webinars report and all the events which is coming up in future will be updated on the LinkedIn as well as Facebook. And we have a very interesting webinar on 26th, 4 to 5:30 on new normal for construction, design, and technology in workspaces. Look forward to meet you again on 26th. Thank you everyone. Thank you, Kay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you,
everyone.
audience.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all, the audience.
Thank you. Bye.